This week, I clutch a little red book, I visit a really old chair, and I take a ride on the Newcastle Metro. Hello and welcome to Mr. C History. Now, you join me in the grounds of St. Paul's Church and Monastery in Jarrow, just outside Newcastle in Tyne and Wear. Now, I came here to make a video about the Jarrow Crusade, the Jarrow March, but as I was reading more and more about it, I found out more and more about an extraordinary person, the Venerable Bede. Why is he so significant? Well, there's lots of reasons. Bede is seen as the father of English history. Indeed, he's the first person who wrote really extensively in what we would consider to be the English language. Now, he was based here for 50 years, in fact most of his life, and he was a local lad born in this Jarrow area, and he went into monastic life, and he read and he wrote and he theolized, and he was also did various different scientific discoveries as well. He wrote a very significant book called The Ecclesiastical History of the English Peoples, in which he basically wrote about the history of Christianity from when it came here to England right up to the Synod of Whitby in about 674 AD. He is pretty much the only reliable historical source we have for that time period. Extraordinarily significant, the first English historian, so we must like him. Not only that, though, also interesting, he was the first person to use the phrase AD and BC, so Anno Domini and various things like that. So all of our dating system, we also rely heavily on him. He also wrote scientific books, calculating various different things, aspects of nature. What an extraordinary person. No wonder he has the nickname Venerable, definitely deserving of that. Well, what happened to him? Well, he was originally buried here at St. Paul's, but then about 30 years after his death, one of the bishops around here thought, oh, no, I'm going to take him. They stole his body and they took it to Durham Cathedral, where he is now, still today, his grave is there. So sadly, he's not buried in the place where he dedicated most of his life. This monastery is an absolutely wonderful place here, and they've excavated quite a lot of it. You can see it goes all around there, and it was actually quite extensive right down the hills there. And there is a church on the site here. That sort of bit to the west is the newer bit, the newer tower there. But this bit at the eastern end is so old. It's got the oldest dedication stone in all of Britain. The chancel, the bit in the middle, is 1300 years old, from the 7th century, just after the death of Bede, which is extraordinary. And indeed, they're just here, there is a tiny little, and you go inside, you can see a tiny little round stained glass window. That is the oldest stained glass window in the world. It is 1300 years old, absolutely amazing. And if you go in there, it's wonderful. You can see the dark stone from years and years of use. There's also a 1200-year-old chair there, just by the altar, looking a bit battered and bruised. It's incredible in there. Now, this monastery was set up by a man called Benedict Biscop, and he had been on a pilgrimage to Rome extraordinarily in the 7th century, and he had seen the idea of the power of Christ and the monasteries. So when he came back here all the way up to Northumberland, he petitioned the King of Northumberland to give him some land to set up a monastery. The King of Northumberland agreed, and not only that, he gave him 2 sites. Here, St. Paul's in Jarrow, the other one in Monk Wearmouth, which is closer to Sunderland, not too far away, called St. Peter's. And so he created one monastery on 2 sites, even more wealth, even more power for him. And that's perhaps why this place becomes such a significant powerhouse. Now, the Venerable Bede was born in 673 AD, and he came here as a lad, started off with a monastic idea as a child, so he probably would have been here right from the beginning, and then spent the rest of his next 50 years writing and learning here. One thing we also get from Bede's writing, he talks a lot about what life was like in the monastery, and we actually get a very good understanding there of what life in all monasteries was like in the 7th century. Pretty boring, I think. Lots of praying, lots of reading, lots of silence. With Bede, because he was able to, he did a lot of writing. And indeed, in one of the museums, I think in Newcastle, they found, whilst they're excavating this area, a stylus, what we would consider a pen, Is this very stylus that Bede used to write his work on? Maybe, perhaps. But I think also a lot comes out in his reading, in his writing. They ate a lot of fish here, which might be interesting, I suppose, on the coast and by the river, etc. And they lived very communally. And also this, Bede also writes about his death here as well, which is rather interesting. Just down at the bottom of the valley there is the River Don, which then leads on to the River Tyne, which then leads on to the North Sea and the east coast of England. And actually this is why these monasteries, it may seem quiet and remote now, but actually were a real hub of activity. And in many ways this monastery, because of Bede's writing, was, you know, the centre of the Western world almost, where lots of all his writings and the knowledge that came through with it. The Western world was a bit of a backwater, obviously, compared to the Arab world and the Chinese world at the time, but that could be a bit of a claim. But anyway, it also highlights that maybe it was a bit of a trading post, and there were travellers. People would come on the boats and they would come and stay here in the monastery. So that's why maybe the Bede became quite venerable. He might have learned various things from travellers, from people around. He may have stayed here all his life, but people may have certainly come to him and told him things. Bede wrote a couple of other significant books here as well. The Codex Amiatinus, which today is the world's oldest Bible. And he also wrote St. Cuthbert's Gospel, which is the oldest intact book in Europe, I think is the claim it has. So he's amazing, this place. And after Bede's death, actually, this monastery grew from strength to strength up until the 11th century or so, because it had so much land around here in the Tyne and Wear region. It probably owned most of the Tyne River Valley, what we would consider the whole metropolis of Newcastle and Gateshead. But what happens? Well, of course, our old friend Henry VIII and of course Thomas Cromwell, the dissolution of the monasteries, pushes it all out, especially up here in the rebellious north. So that was the end of that. It was buried for 500 years until they started to excavate it in the 1970s and people learnt more about the Venerable Bede. I mentioned there the Synod of Whitby, which took place here at the magnificent Whitby Abbey. Now Whitby Abbey was formed just before Bede's lifetime, in 657. It was formed by St Hilda, giving thanks to King Oswy. He was king of Northumberland and won a battle. Anyway, he decided to convene a meeting because there was a dispute going on in England between those in the south and the north in terms of what Christianity to form. Now the north had a more Celtic idea, paganistic maybe, more monastic, perhaps what Bede is more used to. And the south, under the influence of St Augustine, who had just arrived, more Roman Catholic and Roman beliefs, what we would consider to be Roman Catholic. So he came here for a dispute, to settle a dispute. And so they convened at Whitby to form the Synod of Whitby. And in the end, King Oswy decided to go for the Roman beliefs. And there lies 1,000 years of Roman control until our old friends Thomas Cromwell and Henry VIII stop all of it. It started here, it ends with Thomas Cromwell. A little vignette there. So Bede he was there in his infancy, and the reason why we know about this meeting and what discussion is because of Bede's writing. He was writing of the early Christianity here in Britain. There's even a metro station named after him. Well, there you go. Bede, definitely deserving of the phrase venerable, I think, a massively important person. Very, very interesting. And what's amazing about this place, it's totally empty. There's no one here. Yet it's so historically significant and so much wonderful historical stuff to see. I absolutely love it when I find places like that. So please do come along, or maybe don't, to keep it quiet, but come along to St Paul's Monastery and Church here in Jarrow. I hope you've enjoyed that little vignette on the Venerable Bede. As always, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.